Today on Energy Contact. Back about the year 1700, Isaac Newton explained the visible universe to us. Then, in the early 1900s, Albert Einstein explained the invisible universe to us. The catch is, they were both explaining the exact same thing. Today, we're going to look close, real close, to see which of these two worlds is real. And it's not what you've always thought. So, I hope you feel like staying real close to the television, because that's what's coming up right now on Energy Contact.
I'm gonna drive away all these doubts I've been keeping and doubt. Keep my mind on better things. He ain't gonna worry and I ain't gonna complain. I'm gonna drive away all these doubts I've been keeping and doubt. Keep my mind on better things. Just keep my mind on better things.
Hello, and welcome to Energy Contact. My name is Joseph Willenbrink. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you to the production staff here in the studio for helping me get my message out to you. Energy Contact is a series I'm presenting to you as a public service. It's about attaining perfect health, growth, self-improvement, happiness, and realizing your full potential. It's designed to present you a new way of seeing yourself, and a new way of seeing the world around you. We're talking about things that have to do with making an energetic contact with yourself internally and with your environment. There's no difference between the body, the mind, the spirit, the emotion, the intellect, the ego. There's no difference between mass and energy. There's something about us that loves to dissect, that loves to categorize, to take these things out, to take one little part out of the whole and look at that under the microscope. But in fact, all that health and growth and self-improvement we're talking about take place when we do just the opposite. When we put these things together, when we make an energetic contact between the physical world and the unseen one. We're presenting on these programs a brand new paradigm that's thousands of years old. We're presenting extraordinary topics for ordinary people. And let's move right ahead with that. Let's bring up our first slide. Everyone please know that I am not a doctor. This show is not a medical advice show. This show is not a medical anything show. It's important to know that. I might call myself an energy healer, a chakra healer, so might a lot of other people. But state, federal, and local governments absolutely call me no such thing. It's important to know that as well. There's a lot of important information that you see on your screen right there. We're going to leave that up for a couple of seconds. Please read it completely and thoroughly. And when you've got it down, now would be a great time to locate a pencil and paper. Here's why you want to do that. At the end of this program, we're going to roll some credits, and on those credits there's going to be contact information for me. Now I encourage you to contact me. I'm kind of hoping that something that I have to tell you today might inspire you to want to do that. But in order to contact me, you're going to need that contact information. And in order to get it, you're going to need a pencil and paper. Now there will be plenty of time to jot that down when the credits roll, if, and only if, you've got a pencil and paper close by. So please locate that right now. All right, let's come back up here. Today's show is show number 47. Now, if you're tuning in for the first time today, well, thanks. Thanks and welcome. You'll enjoy the show. These shows are sequential, so they build. There's some ramp-up time, some up-to-speed time, some things you will have missed out on, but I'm doing my very best to make each show as complete as on a standalone basis. If it is one of your first times, and if you enjoy what you see today, well, then I do encourage you to look for earlier shows. They'll be on at later times. They'll either be re-airing right here on this channel, or they'll be on at different days and different times in different areas where your friends live. And if you look for them, I'll appreciate it. All right, and now's the part of the show where I introduce my co-host to you. Let's get Slim on camera. This is my buddy Slim here, and Slim is here for a reason. Since we're investigating what it is that energy contacts in the physical self, we have to know a couple of things, don't we? We have to know something about energy. And this show is certainly about energy, but energy is useless until and unless it comes into contact with something. For our purposes, Slim is here to help us understand that thing that the energy contacts. Remember, a body without energy is just a corpse. An energy without a body, it might be a number of cool things, but none of them are human. All right, previously on Energy Contact, we have been talking about things that we cannot see that build all the things that we can see. We've been talking about the physical built by the invisible, about something created about nothing. We discussed all those internal forces that animate us. Invisible things, yet they are precisely the things, the only things that make us different than that corpse we just mentioned. Breath, pulse, rhythm, frequency, wave, constant motion. That's it. Otherwise, we're dead. And we've looked at the external forces, the things from outside of us. The bumps and bruises, the blows, the kisses and hugs of life, the things that push and pull us around. Gravity, energy, entropy, all invisible. We've looked at a couple of other invisible forces recently, pleasure and pain. And we've seen that pain can be a tyrant. It rules us, that until we make our pain go away, we can't think of very much else. So we have concluded that health is the promotion of flow, and pain is resistance to flow. Furthermore, 1 million different people will experience pleasure and pain in 1 million different ways. Not only that, but what's painful to some is pleasurable to others. What's unhealthy for some is healthy for others. What's good for one person is bad for another. If you have problem connecting to that, just ask someone who is allergic to your favorite food. All right, so we can see from all that there are degrees of life, that some people have more of something than other people, and that something makes them healthier. Some people are more alive than other people. Whatever it is that makes us feel physically good or physically bad, that's a function of those invisible, those unseen energy flows. And anything that flows has a current, like electricity does, like a river does. We've seen how all of this stuff acts, interacts, reacts, proacts with that body intellect that we're talking about. How all of those things that we have always seen as brain things, thought, reason, recall, memory, intellect, intelligence, things like that, how they are in fact in every cell of our body. We build everything into the body intellect. All those promotions to flow, all those resistances to flow, all that stuff. We build it all in. And then that body intellect turns right around and builds us. And we've spoken of one other invisible energy source, that mysterious energy that those old Indian mystics called Kundalini energy. All right, so today we're going to see what all this has to do with that interface between health and sickness, between pleasure and pain. But more than that, we're going to see what it has to do with the intersection between science and mysticism. Everything in the real world of energy, mysticism, magic, spirit, things like that, everything that's real behaves according to the laws of physics. It doesn't go outside of those things. In fact, anything that doesn't behave according to the laws of physics is imaginary. That's what we're talking about today. So while we want to understand pleasure and pain, we certainly want to understand why we don't feel good sometimes and what we can do about it. Well, today we're looking a little bit more at those energy flows and those currents themselves. We're going to investigate today what a couple of my heroes, Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein, had to say about these energy flows. So we'll get a little bit more theoretical for a few minutes, but by the end of the show, and even more over the next few shows, you'll see how all of this stuff comes back together. Remember that Newton and Einstein, like myself, were not medical doctors, so some people would say they're unqualified to speak on these subjects. I'm convinced that they're pretty well qualified. All right, but before we move on, we have reached the part of our show where we get to visualize, where we get to take our virtual field trip, our journey in our mind's eye, like we do about this point of every show. And today, we are going to take you to get an MRI. Don't worry, there's nothing seriously the matter, you just need a little scanning, that's all. And so, we're going to go to a place called the Medical Imaging Center. And we're going to slide you into the belly of this big, huge machine. And here's what you experience. Nothing. You hear a bunch of clicks and hums and bangs and pops, but otherwise, you're just lying there. And so there you are in this machine for a length of time, and you're starting to think, wait a minute, this is messed up. there's something up here. This thing must just be some sort of big scam, some big conspiracy to bilk money out of people and out of insurance companies and stuff. This machine can't be doing anything. I don't feel anything. 30 minutes later or so, they've pulled you out of this machine, and we're walking towards the door, and you've started to develop a little bit of attitude about it. But right at the door, the technician catches us and says, "Oh, by the way, do you want to take a look at your scans?" So you walk up to a computer screen, and she begins to show you screen after screen, explaining to you what they were looking for and what they found and how the MRI machine revealed these things, how it brought it all about. And you start to think, well, you know, I didn't feel anything. But maybe there is some invisible force at work after all. All right, hold that thought. Einstein's theory of relativity. It's perhaps the most important work of science since the light was separated from the darkness. Here's a quiz question. When did Einstein win his Nobel Prize for it? I'll give you a few seconds to guess. I'll even give you a clue. It was first published in 1905. Okay, while I'm giving you time, I'll give you a little bit of trivia. That MRI machine we just visited, when it was first invented and introduced to a large-scale market, it was introduced as the NMR machine. Got some different initials here. Well, the MRI means magnetic resonance imaging. NMR, its first moniker, is called nuclear magnetic resonance. And that's a much more accurate description of what it is that that machine does. But when it started being put out in the market for human use, the medical marketers figured out that they'd have a hard time selling people about the concept of getting anybody to slide themselves into the belly of a machine with the word nuclear anywhere in the title. So they changed the title. They euphemized it. But just the title, the machine and everything it does was exactly the same. So you just climbed into a nuclear machine. All right. Now Albert Einstein wasn't a mystic. He was a scientist. He changed the way we understand the world. Not the mystics, by the way. The mystics had it figured out thousands of years ago, but just the rest of us, the mainstream. Einstein showed us that there is absolutely no difference between mass and energy. And if there is no difference, and trust me, there isn't, then there can't be any difference between the body, the mind, the spirit, the emotion, the intellect, and the ego, huh? How could there be? How could there possibly be? Okay, time to answer the quiz question. The answer is never. Einstein never received a Nobel Prize for his relativity theory. Never got much recognition at all for it, really, not for a number of years anyway, for the most important piece of science ever developed, possibly. Why is that? Well, because people were so convinced that he was nutty and that the ideal was nutty, that he was all wrong, that they were going to disprove all of this nonsense any day now. They were in denial, and so they held off awarding any prizes for it. Einstein did win a Nobel Prize, by the way. That was in 1921, you trivia buffs, but it wasn't for his relativity or anything to do with that. All right, back to that MRI you just had. That was Einstein's physics at work. It was an application of quantum mechanics. You get imaged using Einstein's physics. Then you're diagnosed and treated using a medical model from long before Newton's time, from before Descartes' time. And then you are given these Orwellian medications, which again require Einstein's science to develop. Something's missing in that middle step, don't you think? There's a logical break that could lead people down wrong paths. All right, back to Einstein and the fact that he wasn't accepted. What was it that was so different? What was so controversial? What did Einstein discover? Well, he discovered the behavior of nothing. He discovered those invisible forces that we like to talk about on Energy Contact so much. At least the internal ones. Up until Einstein's time, everybody was talking about mass, about matter. Einstein didn't care that much about all that. He wanted to understand that nothing space, that empty space in between it all. He knew that it was the nothing that created everything about this something right here. That's fascinating. Hold that thought for just a second because we're coming right back to it. We've been seeing all of these invisible forces that operate in us. And we've been seeing that they move in currents, and that if we flow with these currents, we get healthy and we feel good. And if we resist the flow of these currents, we get sick. We experience pain. Einstein understood all this, and he explained rationally what before his time was considered witchcraft, mysticism. Now, Einstein didn't invent quantum mechanics. He didn't even coin the term. He didn't create anything new, any more than Isaac Newton invented gravity. Einstein just figured out what had always been. And oh, since I've mentioned Isaac Newton, let's talk about him. Before Einstein came along, Isaac Newton was the one who explained the physical world as we know it. Now, Isaac Newton just might have been the smartest person who ever lived. He might have been even smarter than Einstein. Some say that Newton explained the macro world and that Einstein explained the micro world. Some people compare them like that. The sort of the bigger things get, the more that Newton's explanations fit them. That's valid. I'll buy that. I'm signing up for that one. Still others say that Newton explained the visible world and that Einstein explained the invisible world. Well, now that's true too, to a degree, but it's not really accurate because Newton understood a lot about the invisible world too. Newton's main concern, in fact, was gravity. You can't see that. You know that old legend about the apple doink hitting him up on the top of his head. Gravity completely captured Newton's imagination and his interest. So much so that he calculated how gravity works on planet Earth. And not only that, he accurately calculated the force of gravity on the moon 250 years before anybody set foot on it. Planets too, ones we still haven't set foot on. Now, Newton didn't understand anything about quantum mechanics. That came along after his time. That knowledge, 200 years after his death or so. But Newton did understand mysticism. Newton was an ardent Christian. He was a devout Christian. But he had to keep his spiritual beliefs very private because he was a free thinker. And as such, some of his views would have been considered heresy to both the Catholics and the Anglicans of his day. The Anglicans are the Church of England. Some of those views would have identified him as a magician, as an alchemist, which he was. But that could get a fellow ostracized in those days, or even worse. So Newton didn't talk about everything that he knew, and he didn't talk about everything that he thought. Therefore, most people didn't see him as mystical. They just saw him as nutty, quirky, eccentric, a nutty professor, just like they would come to see Einstein a couple hundred years afterwards. Newton wanted to understand, he was obsessed with the understanding of all those main external forces, those things that we can't see that affect and operate upon all of those things that we can see. Unlike the mystics, he wanted to quantify it all. One of Newton's accomplishments was he invented calculus. And one of the reasons he invented it was because he just wanted to use it as a tool to understand and describe energy, entropy, and gravity. Let's us review those things ourselves. We'll do it without the calculus. Let's take a look at a familiar picture. Let's bring up a slide. What you're going to see here, there it is a slide of an atom in the solar system. On the right side of your screen is a picture of that empty and invisible nothing that occupied the mind of Isaac Newton. Over on the other side, on the left side of the picture, is what Einstein was concerned with, the atom. Take a good look at these two things. They look just alike, don't they? Except that what Newton looked at was huge, humongous, and what Einstein was viewing was infinitesimally small. But on either side, it's about the same. You see a center dot with a bunch of orbiting dots, and you can't see it, but they're orbiting magnetically. What's in the space between the dots? That's what we're interested in. That's what they were interested in. All right, let's come back up here. That MRI you were in, that behaves about the same way. I could put a schematic, like a cross-section of the MRI, on that slide right next to the atom in the solar system, and it would look the same. What you would see is a bunch of little dots magnetically orbiting some center something. In the case of the MRI, that center something is you. So we'll talk about that more someday soon. For now, let's get back to the energy flows. Everybody before Newton who looked at the solar system was preoccupied with the planets. As such, the way they operated had to be some divine sort of thing, not to be understood. Well, Newton didn't care that much about the planets. He wanted to understand the empty space. Okay, Newton really never got to see atoms, though. The ability to see them came after his time. By Einstein's time, people had been looking at atoms for a little while. But it's the same thing. Everyone was trying to figure out atoms by looking at nuclei and looking at electrons. Einstein knew that the empty space is where the action is. Both Einstein and Newton were concerned with the invisible part, with the nothing space, with the emptiness. They correctly suspected, both of them, that that's what built everything. And that was revolutionary. It was revolutionary in their time, and it's revolutionary today. It ought to be taught in the 4th grade, but it's not. This might be the first time you've ever heard it. Here's another important point to keep in mind. Newton and Einstein do not contradict each other at all. Einstein didn't refute or disprove anything that Newton did. Quite the contrary. He just shed a little bit of new light on things that had been in existence from before the dawn of time itself. We, just like Newton and Einstein, are only observing what's always been there all along. All right, now let's return to Newton's macro forces. Energy falls up, gravity falls down, entropy falls apart. Gravity, entropy, and energy are nature. We're going to describe these things in just a second. They're the natural order of things. We understand gravity intuitively, but it's important to know that gravity isn't a thing, it's a current, it's an energy flow. I'm going to show you a couple of pieces of metal here. Matter of fact, we'll see if we can't get a close-up of them here. This couple of pieces of metal, if you can look at them real closely here, what you'll see if I can space, if you could draw what's in between them, I wonder what you would draw. You might look and say, well, I wouldn't draw anything. There's nothing in between them. Oh yeah? There's got to be something. There is something going on between these two pieces of metal, huh? They have a pull on each other. That is, unless you turn them around, then they have a push on each other. All right. The force of gravity and the flow of health behave very much like that invisible nothing between those magnets there. That's all there is to it. Whether you attract or repulse health is a function of how you line up with the energy current, just like whether they attract or repel each other do. We can jump up in the air, but the law of gravity says we will come back to Earth soon enough. That's the way the field goes. Nature wins. Gravity wins. Expecting anything different is like expecting to toss a ball up into the air and have it not come down. The magnetism of my magnets, that's an energy field. It's one of millions. You see it here. If I move them apart, where's the magnetic field now? Well, it's still there. Well, what if I move them apart even further? Where's the magnetic field now? Is it still there? Of course it is. Things don't go away. One of the other things Einstein told us is that mass or energy, either one, it's neither created or destroyed. There's millions of energy waves flowing through you and me right now. There's radio waves, there's cell phone waves, there's electromagnetic waves, and they're all going through us. They're going through you and me right now. So all of those waves and gravity and magnetism have something in common. And they have something in common with health and healing. And gravity always wins. That's important to know. You can fight gravity if you want to, but gravity always wins. And if you fight it, you will lose. So, better to cooperate with gravity. If you cooperate with it, you'll win too. Your health has a flow. If you resist the flow, you'll be sick and in pain. If you cooperate with it, you will feel great. All right, so that's gravity. What about entropy? We got a second to look at that. Entropy, the law of entropy just states, they give you all sorts of highfalutin explanations for the second law of thermodynamics, as it's called. It's very simple. You and I can go down outside and take a drinking glass and drop it on the sidewalk, and we will get thousands of pieces every time. But try as we may, we will not drop 1,000 pieces and get a drinking glass. Things fall apart. They don't fall together. You can put things together. If you've got the right equipment, you can take 1,000 pieces and make a drinking glass out of them. But that's not the way they work unless you put some work into them. It takes years to build a building. But it only takes one little earthquake, one little bomb, one little fire to bring it down, perhaps in minutes. Want to rebuild it again? Well, of course you can. But it's going to take a few years. All right. Newton had laws too. Newton had his laws of motion. And one of them you've heard of. It states that every action, has an equal and opposite reaction. That means if you push something, it pushes back. When you step on the earth, you push into it, and the earth pushes back. What does that have to do with pleasure and pain? Well, plenty. It's when that resistance to flow breaks the current. That's when things fall apart. That drinking glass we threw it out on a sidewalk. A millisecond before it hit, it was whole, it was perfect, it was complete. If you took a movie of it and you did a freeze frame 1 millimeter before it hit the ground, you would see a perfect and whole, complete glass. So here's the sequence. You drop the glass. Gravity falls down. It makes the glass fall to the earth. At contact, the glass can no longer flow with the energy current. The energy of the earth moves up into the glass. Then entropy happens and the glass falls apart. If the glass had feelings, it would feel pain. So you fall off the roof and gravity pulls you down. As long as you're falling, you don't have any pain. You're flowing. At contact in the earth, you can't flow anymore. The energy of the earth pulls up through you. Entropy happens and you fall apart and you feel pain. Now listen closely because this is very important. If you do nothing, the law of entropy says you will fall apart, and the law of gravity says you will fall down. If you're doing nothing right now, you are falling apart right now, because gravity and entropy, those currents, those flows, they're always working. They don't go on break. 24/7, they always go. They never get tired. What's up with that? And what can we do with that? We're going to talk about that over the next few shows. But for now, I'll tell you the short story. What we have to do is promote flow. Stop resisting. Promoting flow brings awareness. And when we become aware, we'll make choices that we can feel good about. All right, that's enough for today. Get your pencil. I wish you peace and positive energy and a healthy life in Energy Contact.